Thank you for joining us here today to talk about real-time operation centers, collaborative intelligence sharing. We really appreciate you coming and sitting down. My name is Colin Coyle. I'm with Haivision. I'm one of our senior vice presidents. Haivision is a manufacturer of video wall processors. So we manufacture the software that drives the video walls that are often the centerpiece of these rooms. But as we'll learn talking to our panelists here today, the wall is probably the most visible but least important part of a successful operations center. And I'll now invite my wonderful panelists to introduce themselves, starting with you, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Zeman. I recently retired as Chief of Police of the Aurora Police Department, and since retiring, I've been going around talking about mass shooting prevention and preparation, highly involved with the IACP's Mass Violence Advisory, and I'm honored to be here watching all of you eat.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jay Drazen. I am the Director of FUSIS Academy and Field Support for FUSIS. However, my background prior to that, I retired also recently, 28 years in law enforcement. My last assignment was the captain of the Crime Center and Forensics Division with the Orlando Police Department, where I was assigned in 2019 to basically research, build, staff, fund, and run the real-time crime center there. And we've had probably close to 150 agencies come through our crime center since that time.
Hello, my name is Sean Arthur. I recently retired from Collier County Sheriff's Office after 30 years. In October, I took a position with Constant Technologies. They were our leading vendor. My last assignment with Collier was to actually be the project manager for our ROTC, and then actually ran it for 3 years after that prior to retirement.
And my name is Darren Hull. I'm a police captain with the Cobb County Police Department, which is the north side of Atlanta and home of the Atlanta Braves. And I help run the real-time crime center in Cobb County along with some other responsibilities. And I'm the one person that's not retired from law enforcement, still trying to get there. So.
Poor guy.
So up here today, we have about 100 years of law enforcement experience, and then me. I did some community theater, which can seem...
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Same.
It can often seem like a mass crime. Before I get going here, I want to give all of us up here on the stage a sense of kind of who's in the room today. So just by a quick show of hands, how many of you have or work in some sort of a real-time operations center today? That's good, it's about half. And how many of you here today, your agency or department, are looking at or considering building a real-time operations center? Okay, so a lot of folks here with experience. So what I wanted to start our discussion with today is a real-time operations center. What is it and what is it not, right? There's a great discussion that was going on last week on LinkedIn, actually, with folks talking about the term of a real-time crime center perhaps being a little bit dated and perhaps leaning a bit more towards the crime aspects of an RTCC versus more of a broader community tool and a public safety tool. And Chief Zeman, you and I had a great discussion where you didn't call your operations center a real-time crime center. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, we called it a critical incident intel center. So, you know, it's interesting because to answer your question, your real-time crime center or whatever you call it is exactly what you want it to be. There is no one cookie cutter approach to it. Just to give you a small background as to why I felt it was necessary is because in our department, second largest city in the state of Illinois, which we all just learned, we had no one central hub for information. Things were going into all different silos, and I wanted a place where we could have operations where, you know, intel could come in, and then within that kick center that we could push out information to whichever division would be most beneficial to handle that. So what we set out to do was build this crime center, intel center, And so we went around to Chicago's, we went to Miami Gardens, we went to about 6 different police departments and looked at, of course, the setup. And what we came back what we realized is that we wanted a little bit of every one of them. There wasn't one cookie cutter approach. And so I think that what I'm trying to say here is the takeaway is that don't emulate someone else's. You have to look at your organization, realize what your needs are, realize and then build it from the needs of your organization and your city or whatever that might be.
And Captain Hull, I think you have a great relevant recent example, right? You built your operations center for one purpose, and then in May, as part of that Midtown active shooter response to Atlanta, I think have been able to kind of broaden out the interagency mission. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. Like she was saying about, there's no cookie cutter approach for this technology, and it's emerging technology. It is not very established, so you can find out not only what you want it to be for your agency, but be willing to adapt as you discover new uses for it. In our case, in May, the active shooter in Atlanta that came up into the Cobb County area, we used it for the very first time as an incident command center or an operations center. And that was just by almost sheer chance. The incident commander happened to swing by to talk to me before he left. And with all the activity, our real-time crime center has an interdisciplinary approach. So we had criminal intelligence analyst, public safety analyst, Homeland Security lieutenant. When he saw the amount of information coming into our real-time crime center, that became our incident command center. We had a very successful operation, very successful arrest, and that kind of operation center is very powerful technology. So that's where we were open to new possibilities.
And so Sean, you and I have been discussing kind of when folks are building out a center or expanding a center or kind of changing the needs or the uses, not everyone kind of starts with that approach that Kristen shared with us of, it can be whatever it is that's right for you. There seems to be this idea that, no, we have to do this best practice that this other person did, but you've got experience both in the public and the private sector dealing with that.
Yes. A lot of these, with my new position with Concert, I go around to all these agencies and talk to them about building their ROTCs. And the basic one thing I have to say is have a mission or a purpose for your room and have that in the back of your head. I talk to a lot of people and I ask them, I said, what are you going to do? What do you want your room to be able to do? And they're unable to answer that. Have a mission or thing. And I know, like, when we were building ours, we had a 3-pillar. We made it a 3-pillar. We did real-time crime, we did command center operations, and then we did analytical data as well. So that room that I was in charge of was constantly busy. And a lot of the times when you build these, they want to see productivity or what are you using the room for. So that was one of the aspects that we did, and it worked out great. But have that mission or that purpose for that room prior to building it.
And Jay, I think one of the benefits of working with someone like Fusus is the idea that the tool isn't the reason for the room, right? It should be in the background. It should be literally just a tool for the people in the space.
Correct. You need to be concerned not just with the products, but the people and the process, right? Those are the things that are going to really make your operation center, crime center, whatever you call it, work for you. And much like their approach, and that's what I do with Fusus now, is the agencies that we work with, we built in Orlando, I took 9 months when I was assigned to this in 2019, build a crime center. Some of you may be in the same position in this room today going, I have no idea what that means. So we took 9 months and actually built out a strategic plan that included everything from what partners did we need to have involved in creating this strategic plan, finances, where were we going to get money for this? And we had to be creative on some of that. We had to bring in our IT folks, and we had to bring in those partner companies that we already had established relationships so they could help us and guide us along the way. And I share actually that plan now with agencies when they're interested. We've kind of rebranded it. It's a roadmap to an RTCC. I supply people with that strategic plan because without a plan, right, and that's why I changed it to a roadmap. If you don't have a roadmap to where you're going, you don't know when you reach that final destination. So kind of like what Sean said is every crime center, real-time crime center is different. You need to establish what problems are you trying to solve because it's not the same at every agency, and then you can identify what tools are going to help you get there.
Yeah, I think in in my experience with Haivision, I think the one thing, I love that you called out the people in the process, right? And I said at the beginning, the wall is the most visible part, but often the least important. Where we have seen agencies be most successful is the ones who aren't building these things just for the worst possible day that someone can have. They're building it with a vision in mind, how this can serve the community on a daily basis and also be a resource for those days that we hope that we don't need it for. Chris, and I have this vision from talking to you. You said that you started building your room by just putting people in an empty room. So I've just got this idea of like 3 people at a table with notebooks for a year.
Yeah, that's the correct visual. So let me first give you a note of caution when you decide to build your center. Maybe don't do it when a pandemic is about to loom. So I did it differently, and here's why: is because I wasn't exactly sure what we needed. I knew that we wanted a place that again wasn't for just that one critical incident, but a place where we could perhaps tap into, with our cameras, and where we could share those visuals, where we could problem solve. We could look for open source, maybe rumblings of protest. So I had this kind of vision for it, and then of course information sharing. So what I did is got people way smarter than me that were patrol officers who we had tapped to run this once it was basically finished. And I said, instead of me telling you what this should be, why don't you tell me? And so we kind of put them in a room and we said, what software do you want? What hardware do you want? And so they started building it. It was a risk to take, but in the end it paid off. The only problem that we had in the middle of it is they were in an empty room for a long time because the pandemic hit, and then of course we had civil unrest. But had that not happened, then they were the ones gathering the information, and they were the ones building it and talking to people in the department. What do you want from this? And so I took a very different approach. And but yes, they sat in an empty room until we were able to. And you mentioned funding. So once our Kick Center was launched, it was then I actually retired. So I reached back to find out what we should have or could have done different. And they told me that it was the funding that was the big thing, because there were a lot of grants that were supposedly promised, and we knew that in 2019, 2020, but those grants still haven't come to fruition. So what they said is, so think about funding, is have the funding on the front end, because they're still waiting for things that were promised them with this, with the grants coming through. So that's just an aside.
And, on the topic of funding, I think funding a space like this, many of you already have a space, but I'm sure you're evaluating expansions, changes, partner agencies. One of the big challenges is the price today is not going to be the price by the time you're ready to pull the trigger. I mean, these are 2, 3, 4-year projects to get something like this off the ground. And Kristen, you were talking about, hey, tell me what tools you need, tell me what software. One of the things that I think I love about working with this group is it feels like a space where, from the private industry perspective, we can really partner with law enforcement and get in early and help answer questions for you. At the end of the day, we just want a relationship, right? We're not trying to say you have to buy this or buy that. And so, Sean, you've been on both sides of that coin. Do you want to talk about that relationship?
Yeah, it's important to realize that if you are going to begin this, and you have, like, Captain Hull runs a great center, you have Jay, who Fusus also ran a great center, you have all of us, and you have the chief who created one. And if you have any questions about theater, Colin's here. But just to let you know that you can reach out to people, and that's where you need to start. Reach out, talk to people, see what worked, what didn't work. It could be a vendor, it could be another agency, just to see what's out there, what you can do, and what you have. And we all realize that, everyone's budget constraints, and we realize that, and you need to format something that's going to work for you within your budget. You have people that can do $2 million, you have people who do $100,000. It goes from wherever you go. And I got to tell you a story. I went to this one agency, we were talking with them about their room, and we were going back and forth about how much, and then I asked what software, and they go, what do you mean software? And I'm like, the software's the money. So we had to explain to them, you're going to need a VMS, you're going to need cameras, you're going to need this. And then they realized, wow, it's a lot more in depth than I thought. So reach out. Like I said, we're all here to help each other. We're all police officers, so.
Except for me.
Well, theater. All good.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And Jay, I mean, so talking about cameras, right? So one of the value propositions of Fusus is being kind of that single pane of glass, but letting different parts of a city, and especially as we talk about information sharing, right? You folks have technology that allows different agencies to interoperate without having to be on the same platform, right?
Correct. So that's truly what led me to go work for this company. Building out a crime center, I dealt with many companies, right? So be careful who you give your email address to if you're responsible for that, as everyone up here can probably attest to. The one company the last piece of our puzzle was actually Fusus. As we built out our crime center, and probably a good time to share, as we built out, and feel free to use this, steal it, we kept coming back to 4 pillars, I'll call them, that enabled us to not just build our crime center, but to run it, right? And what those were, and it was kind of grew organically within the group that was on my project team. So our first one was educate. We realized, number one, we had to educate ourselves, right? Like Sean said, technology is always changing. It's going to change from the start of your project to the end of your project. So we had to continue to educate ourselves. We then moved that along. We had to educate our department when we deployed these technologies, because you have to have buy-in from the people that are going to use it, which is huge. We had to educate the public. So we held media days in Orlando, invited the media to come in and see the technology and get rid of some of those misinformation that is put out there. You know, LPRs track people. No, they don't. We explained to them how it worked. We showed them how it works. So that was the educate piece. Then we said we want to automate as much as we can, right? LPR is a perfect example of that. All of us know in this room, I can sit on the corner with my MCT and I can run every tag that runs through that intersection. A lot more effective to have something that does that automated already and then sends that automated response. And that's how we explained it to the media. We're not doing anything we don't already do, we're just doing it smarter. And especially in today's day and age with staffing issues with law enforcement. So that was automate. We tried to automate as much as we possibly could. Then we realized we need to integrate as much as we can, and that's kind of where Fusus started coming in for our agency. At one point, we had 16 different logins for technology in our crime center. We've narrowed it down to 1. We have a couple that are separate, but that is for operational reasons. And that's what I said, that's really what drew me to this company, and that's what we do in working with all these partners and working with our agency partners. I mentioned that we supply policy and we supply a roadmap to building an RTCC. I now get the luxury, I said we had about 150 agencies before I left come through our crime center. Now I have the luxury of going to 211 agencies that we work with and see how they operate, and we update a sample policy that we can then supply to you as an agency. Because our concern is really to help you get the best product out there. And then our final one was collaborate, which ends on what you were asking about. So one of the top things on our list when we were doing our strategic plan was we have to be able to integrate not only with our private partners, other agencies, large malls, arenas. We also wanted the ability to integrate with our schools and private donor sites. And that is really what Fusus has mastered. So you don't have to be on the same VMS. You don't have to be, you don't even have to have a VMS. If you have cameras, we can install a device that allows you to share those camera feeds back into our police department. And now that is that collaborative effort between the community. And one of my guys that worked in my crime center, I need to trademark this, he labeled it a digital snitch, right? That's what an LPR is and that's what a camera is, right? They're not gonna be harassed to not show up in court. They're not gonna be threatened. They're not gonna forget what happened because it's recorded. So it's really, the technology is just using it to collaborate with our communities and allow them to be a part of the solution without actually putting too much work on them. They don't have to show up in court, right? They do it on the front end, they share their information with us, and now we have a collaborative effort to reach our goals.
So speaking of collaboration, again, being outside law enforcement, I was naive when I got into this space. I was like, of course the county and the neighboring city want to share things. That just makes sense, right? Of course they want to mix their money together and just,
so cute.
they don't care who controls things. So Captain Hull, I think you have recently moved forward on an expansion of your operations center, and I think a lot of that is due to collaboration, right, with nearby entities. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we're trying to take an approach where two things. One, different law enforcement agencies have different resources they can bring to the table and different capabilities. So one of the things we're looking at doing is Cobb County is blessed with the resource of building a nice real-time crime center. And we have 7 cities inside of our county of varying tax bases. Is probably a nice way of saying that, right? So what we're looking at doing is dropping the price of admission to real-time crime center technology and the best public safety technology, because we all know criminals aren't bound by our jurisdictional lines, and having the cities come into our real-time crime center and start an interagency real-time crime center. The price of admission that we're asking for from the agencies is they would supply a staff member. It could be a sworn or non-sworn position. And if every agency does that and my county contributes a certain amount of people, we can staff a real-time crime center 7 days a week, potentially 24 hours a day. That's an impossible lift for a lot of agencies, right? But if we work together, it is not an impossible lift, and that real-time crime center is going to be whatever agency's real-time crime center needs it at the time. And so what we're finding is that this has taken us down a path of technology sharing, resource sharing, intelligence sharing that we haven't experienced before on the local level, because there's always been that kind of artificial divide. So we're just starting to take those steps right now. Matter of fact, we have our second interagency meeting tomorrow, and Jay will be there with us. But we see it as the future of policing. That cooperative effort, that resource sharing, and really making a laser-focused impact on public safety in a jurisdictional area.
One of the areas where I think we've seen some jurisdictions stumble is focusing too much on the technology, building a beautiful room with beautiful displays and beautiful consoles and all this stuff, but not getting buy-in from the field, right, on making use of these resources. And Jay, I think you were telling me that you were one of those field guys, right? And you weren't quite 100% on what all the value of this is, and you came around. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so my previous assignment right before I had the crime center was in charge of our attack units, which is those, unmarked 2-man cars going out hitting the stuff that nobody else has time or effort to do. My main job was to keep them out of trouble from themselves, right? We know those units. So I came from that and then into what I didn't know was going to be and was highly administrative function. So once we started to get up and running, I called in some favors because I knew we had to get buy-in within our agency. So the first 2 people I brought up to operate in our crime center was a 20-year detective, very well respected. He's one of those guys that, as an officer, if he got your case, you felt really good about it. The other person was one of the people that was on my TAC unit, was a SWAT officer, and people thought I was crazy. You're never going to get a SWAT guy to come sit in a room and watch cameras, right? That's what they thought. He came up there as a favor and ended up getting promoted out of there, so I guess he did too good of a job for me. But he had that immediate respect of every officer on the road. So when he came on the radio and he was directing things, people said, oh, if he's bought in and he's telling me where to go and what to do, I'm going to listen. We didn't want those techie guys, right? That's what people thought. You just want to fill your crime center with techie guys. We were and are now a 24/7 operation, and we are operations. We do pre-surveillance on SWAT warrants. We are doing proactive work with our assets that we have, which is where you then get that enhancement to your staffing, right? I can clear a call with a camera, right? Everyone hears about drone as first responder. Darren and I were just talking yesterday, you really have cameras as first responder, right? I get a call to a 7-Eleven that has someone loitering outside. If I have a camera and if I have their cameras due to that collaborative effort, I can check and see if they're still there by the time we get the call, because we know that's not going to be a priority call. I can then call into that convenience store and say, hey, I don't see him out there anymore. Is he still there? No, he's gone. You don't have to respond anymore. So everybody talks about staffing and these manpower issues. It truly does help, and then it truly helps officer safety. I shared with Colin when I was talking to him about this, I knew that we had kind of made it with our crime center when I started hearing officers on the radio going to priority calls and saying, can you get Chase, which was our helicopter, can you get Chase and K9 to the channel and the crime center? It was like that proud father moment almost. I was like,
Yeah.
they get it. And repeatedly, that's what they ask for now. And sometimes they don't even ask for the other two. They're just asking for the crime center because of the resources and the operational value we provide.
I love that you talk about the fact that it's not the tech people running these rooms because, you know, at Haivision, we serve both the public safety and large enterprise community. And in these GSOCs for these large multinational corporations, it's, you know, prior law enforcement, it's detectives, it's lieutenants, you know, it's people who've been in the field who know how to filter through a lot of information quickly and make a fast decision that run those rooms as well, right? And I think our job on the tech side is to make sure that the tech disappears as much as possible, to let folks with decision-making experience do what they need to do. You know, Chief Zeman, you talked a lot about building, you know, that same kind of trust, right, between your team and the field and getting the field to embrace your kick.
Yeah, and it can't be overstated that, you know, that's I think the hardest part is that culture of your organization that looks at this foreign object and is like, what do you want me to do with this thing? And so there were two, you know, major obstacles aside from the aforementioned, but one was the community, because when we called it the, you know, critical incident intel center, the word intel, what are you watching us? And so that is just a matter of communication. It's just good marketing. It's getting out in front of it and describing this is a great crime-solving tool. But to your point, the culture inside the organization, people were so resistant to it, and we did exactly what you described, is put people in there, one from Vice and Narcotics, and the other a detective, both well-revered. And even with that, it took some time. And I had the very same, in that rollout, when I started to hear people call kick and you know, let's see what they can work up. What ultimately occurred was, it's kind of like the early adopters that we look at in technology. You've got your early adopters, your Luddites that are really resistant, but then the early adopters are the ones, then they go back and they say, hey, wow, Kik really, they worked up a file for me. So what was happening was someone from Vice Narcotics would call up there and go, all right, this is the guy we're watching. What do you have? Can you find us? So they would work up a file. They would share that intel. So then that individual would go back and say, hey, this is what they did for me. This was, you know, saved me mounds of time. So then just by sheer word of mouth, it then became a tipping point where then people just started to call up there, and that did take a lot longer than I thought, though. So just be mindful of the culture of your organization, and you honestly have to just keep touting it and remind people, and soon enough, you know, it'll start a movement.
So law enforcement culture doesn't change quickly. Got that.
No,
Just gonna note that.
write that down, everyone. That's
Sean, let's talk about the process and the technology side, right? So what are the mistakes? What are the red flags, you know, that people are making? And you know, I mean, I can start just by saying that I think a lot of times folks just focus too much on just the hardware piece, right? I think, as Jay said. But what do you see as the missteps?
It was like I said earlier, you know, you have to plan for that software, and there's tons of software out there. Building the space is one aspect of it, and Constant Technology would love to help you with that, by the way. I'm just letting you know that the software, you have to plan on your software and policy. And like Jay said, we also, with Constant, we provide a policy for you that I wrote for our center for facial recognition, artificial intelligence, things like that, that, you know, you're going to be questioned by the public on that. So just have that in mind, that the software that you use has to kind of fit not only with your agency, but with your analysts. We were running, when I left, 8 analysts, and it got to a point we were running 42 software programs in the room itself, and it became burdensome on them. And when they said, hey, Lieutenant, that's enough, I can't take it anymore, and then you start pulling back. Just remember, what your people can handle is what your room's gonna be able to handle, and give you the best outcome of what you want from your room.
Captain Hull, how long have you been running your real-time crime center?
For just a little bit over a year.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And in that first year, what are some mistakes that you folks made? Thoughts that you had or presuppositions that you had that turned out not to be true once this thing really turned on and hit the street?
I think we've been kind of lucky because we've always taken an incremental approach. We call it crawl, walk, run is what we've always done. So you don't need to, when you're looking at an operations center, you don't have to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. You don't have to go from an empty room into a Taj Mahal operations center. So be willing to start, kind of like Chris was talking about, be willing to start with some people just having a conversation. Be willing to start with just a couple of officers with a couple of radios and a couple of computers, you know. Be willing to be adaptive to the changes in the technology and stuff like that. So the mistakes I would say that you would make is if you just determine exactly what you want from day number one and you're rigid and structured in that approach, be willing to take that crawl, walk, run mentality and gain steam as you go.
Yeah, one of the things that we say a lot around Haivision is that when someone's buying our technology, they're not buying a video wall, right? They're building a room, if not a whole building, around a video wall. You know, and what I think we would advise is to make sure that you leave space. Because once you start using these things and getting out there, you're going to find new uses. You're going to find, you know, as you get buy-in from the community, from neighboring folks, you don't want to have to spend a couple $1 million building this room just to go, well, we needed a bigger room.
Can I add on that?
Yeah,
It's like
please.
when we were building our room, and I made sure we put in extra cables and wires to grow. And by the time I left, we were already through that, so it wasn't planned enough. Because as the room grew, we had drones being flown out of there. We had, you know, analytics done. So just remember that. Too much is never for a room when it comes to cables and IT. Just make sure of that.
And I would also add, just because of reaching back and to our Kick Center and asking them, now that it's been up and running, what would you do differently? Some of the things they said is not only collaborating with, you know, outside entities such as yourselves, but even within the city. They said they actually got into a couple pull and push matches between those in other departments, IT for the city versus IT for the police department. And they ultimately went with computers that IT wanted, but the police department wanted something different, and they just changed them, and the police got what they wanted in the first place. That also, they said they ran into some barriers with putting LPRs. The city had an idea of what locations they wanted, and the police department had a very different idea. So that collaboration is also necessary within your own ecosystem. So left hand must always know what right hand's doing. And then to your point, he also said that being able to adapt, looking at new software and saying, hey, you know, let's move with the times and not being so rigid in the way that we had the vision, and to pivot into new technology, new ideas as they arise.
Yeah, and you know, for you folks who are, you know, running operation centers today, you know, that partnership with IT is so important from a manufacturer side. We always love to get talking with IT as early as possible, because if we're in there with them early, it can be a nice, easy experience for everybody. But there's so many times where an agency gets to, like, they bought the thing, it's 6 months later, they're ready to install a thing, and you're like, okay, I need IP addresses, and they're like, oh, we forgot to call IT, and now it's a battle. But so even if you have a center running today, you know, your needs are changing, your needs are growing on a daily basis. You know, make sure that your manufacturers have a good relationship with your city IT, right? And if they don't, then just drag them by the ear and sit them down. Perfect, thank you. Community engagement, right? So we've talked about a couple of times community engagement and, you know, bringing the community on board. I think there is a misconception in the world that these rooms are a lot of, like, guys like me doing Hollywood hacker on their keyboards, watching 500 cameras. So let's talk about how you've been able to get community buy-in and build those community relationships. Jay?
Yeah, so I mentioned during our build out, we brought the media in multiple times. We also do a Citizens Police Academy in Orlando. That is a part of that academy now. So not only do they see the rest of the agency, they come in there and we show them the operations. All of our commissioners, the mayor, everybody was brought in there and they see how that operates. And it's just being transparent and upfront with how things work. Most of what we had to fight against was
Microphones.
honestly
Microphones, yeah.
misinformation. People would come in, and we saw it a lot in those police academy sessions. people would come in and ask a question, hey, I heard, or I saw in the news, or I saw this, and we would just tell them that's not at all how it works. In fact, here's how it works, and we would just show them and just clarify that miscommunication. But you have to do that. If you try to keep it, I don't want to say secret, but if you're not as open as you can the first time something happens and they have some other perception of how that worked, you're fighting an uphill battle, right? So getting out in front of it is always going to be much easier, because if you wait to be asked the question, it looks like you're rationalizing what you're doing versus providing information.
And so, Chief Zeman, I know you kind of got your operations center moving, you got that ball rolling, then you retired, but you still stay in touch, right, and network with your old command team. So, I know you did a lot of work in advance getting community buy-in, but it doesn't just stop when the lights turn on, right?
No, not at all. And the community buy-in, it was a challenge. Again, that was, kind of the first step because of the misconceptions. And we had also partnered, talk about public-private partnerships, but we had also were the first in the state to partner with Ring Neighborhood. And so the first thing with our Kick Center was our Ring doorbells. You guys can tap into everything that I see in my home, right? Absolutely not. And so it was getting out in front of it from the beginning, describing what we were trying to do and what the end in mind is. And we always have the same end in mind, but we just have to remind people of that, is to drive down crime, to protect victims, solve these crimes. So getting out ahead of it and then constantly beating that drum. I mean, it's as though that you feel like you're going to keep saying it, and yet the message has to be continually repeated, and the transparency, and that is the operative word here, is to show them here is exactly what we're doing in license plate readers. You mentioned that earlier, is that we're tracking them, not the case. So a little education goes a long way, but unfortunately it has to be done over and over again.
Listen, I would love it if, I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and if the Bucks County Sheriff, I would gladly share access to the cameras in my house. I got 3 little kids. I need a nap. If you guys could just watch them for an hour, make sure they stay away from the stove. But we were talking about whack-a-mole earlier, right? And Captain Hull, I know that you're great about media engagement, about talking about how you're using this operations center, but that's also got to lead to some frustration, right? It's wins when you're sharing the great things you're doing for your community, but it probably leads to kind of a wellspring of people who weren't aware of what was happening, right?
Yeah, I would say you've heard a lot of good advice. The constant drumbeat is a really good thing to take away from that conversation. For us, I would say 2 different things. One, it's you're pushing on all fronts. So you've got your media, your social media, your regular community groups you interact with. Also consider bringing groups that are traditionally considered antagonistic to law enforcement, some nationally recognized groups. Bring those people in and share with them what you're doing in your real-time crime scenario policies, because that's kind of an iron sharpens iron approach that you might be surprised by, that if you're preemptive in bringing them in and showing them what you're doing and what you're not doing, talking about misinformation, you'd be surprised how having those groups support is very beneficial. And then the second thing I would share with you guys is figure out what your why is. So that's a message we always try to share with every group. It may be tailored to the group that we're presenting to, but the message is always the same. The why is always the same. And the great part about local government, because there's a lot of problems that can be challenges associated with local government, but a local government, you can reach your local community and those local groups. And people can tell if you're being genuine with them when you talk with them. So if you can figure out what your why is for your operations center and share that message to the media and on all different fronts, I think you're going to find that community buy-in, and you can overcome some of the hesitancy you might encounter.
Yeah, please.
So something to add, just it goes on this topic. So specific to FUSIS, something that we offer, and this goes into that collaborative effort, right? And you mentioned Ring. So Ring is normally like at a residential, right? Most businesses have some type of other security aspect. But so what we offer is 2 things for the community to participate and collaborate with us, and henceforth their agency, is they can actually just register that they have cameras. They don't want to share them, they don't want to give them to us, but they just want you to know, I have cameras. If something happens in my neighborhood, please reach out to me. And what they do is they supply their information, email, phone number, name, and that they have cameras in their neighborhood. We register those on the agency's map with a separate icon, so there is no access to their cameras. And very quickly, you will have thousands of your residents in your area register their cameras. How powerful is that to go before the media, your city councils, to say, we've provided this opportunity. Look at the thousands of members of our community that want to let us know that they want to cooperate with us. They haven't provided access to anything. So that gets rid of that, perception of they're just going to look at my cameras. But what it does, and most of my background was in investigations throughout my career, it enables you to do a virtual canvas, right? You have an incident occur in that area. Even if you don't have access to their cameras, you can send a message to them through our platform that says, hey, this is what happened in your neighborhood. One of two things: can you check your cameras? And if you have information on the crime, a vehicle description, whatever, hey, check your cameras for this. Or maybe they were just out walking their dog and saw a car fly through the neighborhood, right? It's that virtual canvas that allows you to do. Now, we do that with businesses as well, but a lot of businesses will choose to integrate their cameras into an agency system. So when something's actively happening, we can actually access their cameras. But what a powerful tool, and you're giving the community that opportunity to say, we support you. Because it's that silent majority that we're really seeking to reach. People are quiet, and it goes back to that digital snitch idea, right? One time they register, and now you've got them. They're cooperative with law enforcement, they want to help law enforcement, and they're providing you their information to do so.
Chief, you have a question?
Can I add to that too? I love that you brought that up, because that was also very pivotal when people started sharing. But then here is all of the success stories that we get from that, people who share footage with us, but then we stop there. So this is why this is so important, that then you have to push out those success stories to say, as a result of our real-time crime center and as a result of our partnership with community members who voluntarily shared their information, shared this footage, and when you have a great win from your intel center, whatever you're calling it, where you push that out, because we just don't do a good enough job to tout our success stories. We have a lot of them, but putting them out in the public, and so that's, I think, where we fail truly as a profession. So you got to just keep telling the stories.
To build on Jay's point about that silent majority, I live in a sleepy town, right? And I'm sitting at home in my office one day around 3 o'clock, and I hear gunshots outside my house. I was like, what the hell just happened? And you go out, and the police arrive pretty quickly, and they're looking around, and for whatever reason, someone driving down the street, joyriding, decided to pop off a couple shots from a handgun. And so many of my neighbors were coming out to the responding officers and saying, hey, I have a Ring camera, I have a Nest camera, how can I help? So, just a bit of advice to those of you who don't have an operations center, they don't have integration with platforms like this, at least to have documentation available to homeowners to make it really easy for them to understand step by step how they can pull that content and share it with you. It's going to give you a fantastic tool. Sean? Anything that you want to add on community engagement?
I'd have to say, yeah, that was one of the key things. And like I spent most of my career on patrol and worked my way up there. When I got to these crime centers, I was like, oh, the sheriff asked me to be the project manager and then to run it. And I was like, oh, gosh, that had been a job. But then as it went on, I actually saw the benefit of what this can do and the help that the cases that we solved in the room for patrol, like, for instance, a missing person using LPRs to track the car that she left in, and as you know, it'd be a multi-agency event, getting all these people out there trying to track this person down. We were able to solve in like 15 minutes from the room. So it is a force multiplier when you're looking at that, and that was just one. The other thing was they used to call me Lieutenant Disney because I was doing tours 4 or 5 times a week for our general public and everyone else. It's a funny name. But and I can't, the main majority of the people that came in were like, oh, you're watching us on the cameras. No, we're watching the cameras when there's a crime. Our IT department would kill us with the bandwidth that we use trying to get that into the room. But so once they started to realize, and we did tons of tours, these people started to realize, oh, when there's a crime, then they start going into their software and looking. So once we got that out and that perception that we're watching cameras all day out, it was, I can't tell you how many times the public was just so happy, and they'd actually tell their HOAs and their family, oh, you guys got to go up there and see a tour to see what this county does. They were actually proud of it more than some of the people that work at the sheriff's office, believe it or not. what was going on in the room and how high tech we became. So.
I'm going to just take a moment. We have a lot of intelligent people here in the room. We've got 100 years of crime-fighting intelligence up here and me. If anyone has any questions for the panel, please feel free. Just go raise your hand, and my good friend Dustin will come find you. So just pop your hand up if you have any questions for the group. There we go. Dustin, we got a question in the back. 2 questions in the back. We're going to make this a conversation yet, friends.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's been a wonderful panel. My name is Natalie Best. I'm actually from the District of Columbia Department of Transportation. So in DC, we always sit at the foot of government, so everything's very political. And so I've heard you talk a lot about sort of the collaborative process of community and other stakeholders, but is there also sort of a layer of politics that goes along with this? Multiple governments, I'm sure there will be. If not,
politics and multi-jurisdictional law enforcement, never. So I'm going to let everyone else answer intelligently, but I will first say that we are actually currently working with the DC Metro Police Department on a real-time crime center. We are in the process of implementing and building that out right now. So if you want to say hi afterwards, we'll make sure to connect you to the right people. We can make sure that you're being introduced to the right folks for that bit of collaboration. But who wants to field that one first?
Good. We'll start down there and make our way.
So, yes, your electeds are very important to your operations center, and you can help them out in multiple ways and get their buy-in in multiple ways. So, number one, you know the type of groups that are going to reach out and express concern to your electeds in your area, and that was part of what I was talking about of being proactive and reaching out to those groups first. So instead of creating a situation where your elected is having to receive potentially negative information, concerns, and then they're having to redirect it to you, if you proactively take that burden off your elected and start addressing those concerns in the community and sharing your why, right? Another thing is to make sure that if you have those success stories, like we were talking about sharing your success stories, is giving your elected an opportunity to be a part of that success story if they choose to. Because without your elected, at least like I'm a county government, we have a very talented board of commissioners, 5 board of commissioners. Without their support, we don't have the funding, right? So what we have done is we have brought them in for different press conference opportunities and things like that to make them a part of the team versus just this silent person, right? We make them feel a part of the public safety focus and the groundbreaking technology and taking care of the community, and you build up an ally instead of just a party that you're answering to, if that makes sense.
I want to actually jump the order on this and tee this one up for Chief Zeman because, DC DOT, you have a really interesting set of parameters. It's not just DC elected government. It's Congress, it's the state of Virginia, it's the state of Maryland, right? It's all of the other jurisdictions that tie into everything that you do. It's WMATA, right? The Washington Airport Authority. You have so many stakeholders. And Chief, I think you were a city that is in 4 counties when you were...
Yeah, that's true. And I would echo exactly what you said. So just from, a local municipality perspective, but we're in 4 counties, Aurora, which is just insane. But the first stop is the stakeholders within the city, so the mayor of the city. And when I first started to have this, in my brain, and I just started planting the seed, is that this is what I'm going to try to budget for. So you have to have buy-in. There is no way that you cannot have buy-in from your elected officials. So we did exactly that when we started to build the blueprint for it, and we started to really, determine how we wanted to build it. We took it right to City Council, and this was in its raw stage to say, here is our why. This is precisely why we want to do it. And then every step, we made sure that we gave them a presentation, made sure that they were the first ones in, because their constituents are the ones who are going to them that are going to complain and say that we're spying on them. So without that, you truly can't move forward. That's foundational. Now, as far as the other counties, we were looking at different sheriffs. We actually took a different approach, and we decided if we build it, they will come. Instead of talking to everyone else, we decided to build, with Aurora being the largest part in Kane County, we just decided to build what was going to be best for our organization and our city as a whole. And then we invited them to come in and collaborate in any way they wanted to, but we really didn't bring them in early.
Jay or Sean, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, like I mentioned, most of my career detective, right, and then operations. I was not a political person. I've always been in my law enforcement career very upfront. If you ask me a question, be careful because you're going to get an honest answer. So I learned very quickly. I had to educate myself, right? One of the pillars, how to work the political process. We did site visits, much like Chief said, we did site visits all over the country. I included an IT architect from the city. Included them on our site visit trips because they were going to be a stakeholder in this process, and we needed to get them involved on the outset. And it also saved me a lot of heartache later on because they knew what we were doing. Because I certainly wasn't going to be able to explain it properly, right? I'm not an IT person.
And if you've selected any software or hardware vendors to work with, or even consultants to help spec things out, you really should embrace them to help with the political side of it, because from our perspective, we are more than happy to reach out to our existing partners in law enforcement that we serve as a technology provider to make sure that they'll open their doors, right, to your stakeholders to see what can be accomplished. And this is an area, a lot of times when someone is trying to sell something and they go, oh, well, they're going to bring in, a different agency, your salesperson's eye is going to light up and go, I can make this bigger, right? But we understand, the folks that serve law enforcement, that's how you get a Frankenstein's monster designed by committee, and that's how you fail a city, right? So if you're partnering with good technology partners, they're going to remain focused on you and what you need and helping you navigate that.
I would add also, it's specific to DOT and those type of issues. We brought in our traffic engineering cameras, right? They're all over the city. They very specifically did not want us recording their camera feeds. So at the time, I was still working for the PD, didn't work for Fusus yet. We contacted Fusus. They created core devices for our city that did not even have the ability to record. Because my thought process was, I'd rather get something than nothing. Yeah. Right? And here we are 4 years later, now they are talking about wanting to be able to record those. So take what you can get when you get started, because something's better than nothing. And then one other last thing on the political front, I found out that each of our city commissioners got allocated funds for their specific areas. And we talked about funding earlier. So I contacted, right, one of our city commissioners and I said, hey, we're having a crime problem in this area. I hear you have funding. You have your own allocated funding. So instead of maybe throwing a block party, how about buying a camera for us? I'll have my analysts run the data. You put the camera up in the highest crime area in your district, and you take credit for it. You're working with us, and that's sure as heck, that's what he did. And then another council person said, how come you didn't come to me? So it's being creative with those funding ideas, finding out where it is, and just learning how to approach people and build those relationships.
And we'll throw your block party. No, like Constant or Haivision, I'm not even kidding. You got a new real-time crime center and you want to bring the community in, we will bring food trucks and we will help make a day of it 100,000% any old time, right? Your success is our success. We had another question in the center of the room. Dustin?
Thank you. My name's Kyle. I'm with Phoenix PD. We're in the throes of actually deploying all our gear for our real time. Main question being, given the experience that everyone's had, what is the maintenance period throughout the lifespan of this gear that's deployed in the area? How did you guys address it, as in stuff going down? Did you have a plan or just learn along the way?
Sean?
Yeah, just so you know, in our original talks when we started planning this, we had an IT person assigned to our room. Of course, that never really happens once it started, but we ended up having an IT person. I said the last year I was there, actually assigned 50% of the time to the room to help us with software issues. If things go down, just remember when you do start doing like video walls and consoles and all that, there's a warranty on all that stuff. I do recommend sometimes getting that additional warranty added to that. I know with our wall, it was we had a few things. It's funny because we had a few issues with the wall, and it ends up it was actually our IT and their firewall that was causing those issues a lot of the time. The equipment that you have usually will last at least 10 years. 7 to 10 years is usually what we think of when you're trying to up or redo or update your room. So just keep that in mind, but I'd have to say having an IT person in the room along with your analysts and things would be a key, or someone at least knows what's going on, assigned to the room during the planning phases, and then when you're starting with the room and when it's going, because that IT person saved us a bunch of times at 2 o'clock in the morning when we're trying to figure out, and it ends up being a software issue that's really not anything to do with the hardware and things. So.
And I think the best advice I can give on this topic is your displays, right? The display technology is a commodity technology. The manufacturers behind those things change their lines every 18 months, if not faster. So spend an extra $12,000 or $20,000 today, however much it takes, to have at least 2 extra displays or panels in a warehouse or a location that you, the city, control. Because if you don't, and one goes out 3 years from now, you're gonna have to spend $250,000 because you're not going to be able to find compatible technology to put into that wall or into that space. So buy those spares. And I know it's hard to have equipment that you invest that sits and does nothing, but I can't emphasize enough how important that can be. That's amazing insurance to avoid having to spend a ton of money down the road to refresh a whole wall that is otherwise perfectly functional.
And just to tap on that, we ended up buying 2 extra monitors that we had, and we ended up using one of them that we had to flip out real quick. So, and it was a matter of maybe 30 minutes getting them down and putting it back up. So.
Yeah, people trip, Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, someone is sweeping a floor and hits a thing with the handle of the broom. These things happen, and you have manufacturer's warranties, and the manufacturer might tell you, well, here, this is the model that we're replacing that with, and now you've got, a thick bezel in your beautiful wall. It doesn't line up the right way, and it really drives people crazy. Chief, you look like you were going to jump in.
No, I thought it was going to be a dumb answer to say we got warranties, but that turned out to be the right answer. So I was like, I don't know how the sausage is made. I just,
Well, kind of in line with that. So we actually were able to budget for what we called rip and replace. It started out smaller as our 4-year period went on while I was there. That budget grew. It was intended for rip and replace, but I was trying to be a little creative, and if things were working, I spent it on new assets. So that's how we built our assets across our city. But made sure I didn't spend it all, so if something did go down, I didn't want someone pointing the finger at me like, hey, we give you rip and replace money. But you also want to be careful. If you're in charge of this project, make sure that you learn what these vendors are going to do for you in that process, right? That's part of the education process for me. I wasn't in purchasing. I wasn't buying things for my agency prior to that project. One of the reasons we went with Fusus, if their cores go down, we're going to replace it, right? That's part of our contract. You work with people like Constant and Haivision. You want to work with vendors that are going to support their product. So be careful. Make sure that is in the contracts if you're responsible for working those out for your agency. But also build in some replacement funds that you can get. Once you start getting wins with your center, your replacement budget's going to grow because they're going to see those wins.
And bear in mind, a scope of work protects whoever wrote it. So if your vendor wrote the scope of work and you didn't, it's protecting your vendor more than it's protecting you. And contracts exist for when people aren't friendly, right? So, just make sure you understand what the obligations of all parties are for the long term. Any other questions in the audience? Perfect, right up here.
I'll just be loud enough that you don't need the microphone.
Perfect. I'm going to repeat it anyways because we're recording this, but go right ahead.
Very good. If you like.
No, go ahead.
Specifically, those 4 pillars that Jay, you were talking about, can you expound upon the automate function beyond LPRs or cameras? What would you recommend as critical infrastructure or policies to help automate the system?
So, Jay, let me just repeat that real quick. So the question for you was, for the sake of the record, you talked about 4 pillars and you mentioned automate. So what does automate mean beyond just LPRs and that low-hanging fruit? What do you recommend for policy and procedure?
So interesting question, because really Automate ended up turning into workflow process for us, right? So it's not just the technology automation, while that is key, right? So depending on the technology buy, you want to get something, number one, you can access quickly, right? We had access to our school cameras, but we had to go through a VPN on a specific computer over to this. So it wasn't fully automated, but we were able to pull that into a new system that then gave us one-click access to their cameras, right? But for us, automation really was workflow. During my career, I was part of our hostage negotiation team. I'm very procedural and process-oriented, and I made sure when we built ours out, we built very specific training programs for the people that work in there, and we had workflow. When an incident kicked off, people knew what they were going to do. As simple as we said, we're going to have a detective of the day and we're going to have an analyst of the day, and it rotates every day. If something kicks off, you're the lead detective on this incident that we're working. So people knew what their roles were, and a lot of that came from my experience as a detective. I supervised our homicide unit. I was actually our homicide unit supervisor in 2016 when we had the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando. I learned a lot from that, and I brought all of my detective experience and processes on getting things done into our crime center. And my goal was to turn everybody in there, whether it's a detective or an analyst, into a detective. To think like a detective, think 2 steps ahead. And that's why I always bring up it's people, process, and products, right? People always comes first for me. If you don't have the right people in there, and during our site visits, we went places that had every top-end technology that you could buy. Usually in cities that had higher crime rates, they get a lot more grant money, but the processes in place were non-existent. And we were there visiting them, watching them not do their job. So if they're doing that when they have visitors, what are they doing when no one's around, right? So it really is, that is a big part of that automation. It's not literal automation where this does this, although some of the technology we added does do that. But it's automating your processes so that everything flows very smoothly. We actually tied in our command staff office, our chief's conference room, into our crime center. So during a significant incident, we kind of become the incident command post, but we can pipe everything down to the chief's conference room so we don't have 30 people sitting over our shoulder asking questions and watching. Everything's on their screens as well, and we can pipe everything down there to them. So it's really about process.
And that's one of the things that we fight against our customers with sometimes at Haivision, because our platform allows for a lot of automation. It allows for surfacing alerts, which can lead to alert fatigue if you have too much blinking and bubbling at the top. Automation from a technology standpoint can actually be awful, right? If you've set your wall to change a view when a certain alert surfaces, but you're in the middle of an incident response, and now it's clearing that dashboard that you needed. So I love that advice, just to focus on the people in the room. And
just to add on that, Colin, it was one of the hardest things that I had to deal with was dispatch, our communication center, to be honest with you. And because they thought we were taking their job. What was the delineation when they were going to release that incident and let us run it to give them time to answer calls? So we had to, we created a policy on that, what would work and not work for them. We actually brought them in, sat them down, went to their in-service and talked to them about it and what they wanted to do, what we could do to help them to alleviate some of that workflow for them. When there's a big incident, they still have to dispatch calls. So we took that from them so we could actually work in a critical incident and push the dispatch calls back to them so they could do their job.
So I'm going to give Captain Hull last thought on the topic, and then we are at time. So then, Darren, afterwards, I think everyone just, one final thought to share with the group. Where can they find you and how to follow up?
I guess the one final thought is right now, we were talking about this last night, it still is kind of a small community and real-time operation or crime center game. Networking is going to be very important to your success. Trusting on the collective wisdom of your vendors, on your other real-time crime centers and people you know. So when you hear people tell you, hey, reach out to me if you have any questions, take advantage of those opportunities. When you go into a new area for a conference or something like that, if they have a real-time crime center or real-time operations center, pop in and see what they're doing. I went to a conference earlier this year in Orlando. visited Orlando Real-Time Crime Center and sat down and immediately walked away with 2 or 3 things that I knew we absolutely were going to do. So just understand, this technology hasn't been around 30 years. There's not established best practices out there, and this is the way you do it. Take the time to learn, adapt, and grow your network, because that collective wisdom is going to be critical to your success.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, just to hit what the captain's saying, if you ever guys need anything, please give us a call. And I know the president at Constant Technologies, Brad, he tells me, we don't really care if you're buying something or not, we just want to help public safety out. So he gives me that power to just do what we want to do. You call, you need a policy, you need this, you need that, I'll be more than happy to help you with whatever you're doing. And I would take a parent, Jay's got, and the chief, Colin, all of us, we're here to help you guys. Don't make the same mistakes we did. So we want you to succeed.
Jay?
Yeah, agreed. And on that note, my email address is jmd@fusus.com. I will actually give you my personal cell phone number as well. I'm living, breathing crime centers for the last 4 years and love it. So I am happy to share any information I can with you. My number is 407-383-3013. And I am not in sales with Fusus. I always tell everybody this when we go do training as well. I am never going to try to sell you anything. Our product sells itself, which is why I went to work for the company, because it sold it on me. The officer safety value is huge, which is why I'm so passionate about this space. It really is officer safety, intelligence, doing a better job. So if anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out to me.
Don't call me, I'm retired. Just kidding. It leveled up our police department, so if anybody has any questions from my perspective, I'm happy to answer them.
Perfect. And then, from the Haivision perspective, first, we are not Hikvision, Hikvision. They are a bad Chinese company. So, no, we are not Hikvision. To echo what Jay and Sean have said here, feel free to reach out to us to talk to our real-time crime experts, our public safety experts. We don't care if you bought our technology or someone else's technology. This is really a world where a rising tide lifts all ships, right? My team wants to learn from what you're doing so we can help other cities, other states, other municipalities. So if you want to just network and share, and you're just trying to find out who else in the world is seeing the challenges you have, reach out to us at haivision.com, Haivision. We would be happy to try and make introductions for you to folks that we know that have gone through similar struggles.
And just to add, I have some cards. If you guys need them, they'll be up here. So they have my personal number as well.
If you want my personal number, it's really just to discuss how much you loved Hadestown, and it's a great show. You should go see it. 6, by the way, 6 is fantastic. Go see that one on Broadway. All right, listen, thank you everyone for coming today. We appreciate your time.